The Light Between Us. In a quiet seaside town named Alvaridge, where the ocean breeze whispered through the cobbled streets and lanterns glowed like fireflies at dusk, lived a young woman named Alara. She worked in a small bookstore that smelled of old pages and sea salt. Her life was simple, peaceful, even, but beneath her calm exterior was a heart that longed for something more, not adventure, but connection, a love that felt like home. Every evening, she would walk along the beach with a cup of coffee, watching the lighthouse flicker its warm light over the waves. That lighthouse, perched high on the cliffs, had long been automated, but stories still lingered, of a keeper who once lived there, a man who disappeared many years ago without a trace. One day, during a sudden autumn storm, Alara saw someone by the lighthouse. Curious and concerned, she climbed the hill, wind pulling at her coat. There, soaked and trying to fix the door, was a man with windswept hair and eyes the color of the ocean after rain. His name was Kalen. "I'm restoring it," he said, nodding toward the lighthouse. "It belonged to my grandfather." From that day forward, their paths intertwined. Alara would bring him tea and books, and he'd let her sit inside the lantern room while he worked. Together, they painted the walls, cleared the overgrown path, and restored the brass telescope that once watched ships roll across the horizon. As the days passed, something bloomed between them, unspoken but unmistakable. Kalen would steal glances when she laughed. Alara found herself lingering after sunset, hoping he'd ask her to stay just a bit longer. One night, during the first snow, Kalen lit every lantern inside the lighthouse. The golden glow spilled out like a beacon into the dark. He took her hand and led her to the top, where the stars shone bright above them. "I don't know where this will lead," he said softly, "but I haven't felt this alive in years, not until you walked up that hill." Alara smiled, tears in her eyes. "I think I was waiting for you without knowing it." They kissed under the flickering light, the sea singing below, and time seemed to pause just for them. Years passed. The lighthouse became a place not only of light but of love. Alara turned her little bookstore into a cafe library, where Kalen's photographs of the sea hung on the walls. They hosted poetry readings, taught kids about stars and maps, and every evening, they'd walk hand in hand by the shore, just like the beginning. And when people asked how they met, Alara would always say, "It was the light between us. It led me to him." When autumn comes again. The first time Emma met Daniel was beneath a golden maple tree in Central Park. It was a chilly afternoon in early October, leaves drifting like confetti through the air, the city humming in the distance, and the scent of roasted chestnuts wafting from a nearby cart. She had been sketching in her notebook, lost in her world of quiet lines and soft shading, when a gust of wind ripped a page from her hands. It landed at Daniel's feet. He picked it up and looked at it, an unfinished sketch of the tree they were standing beneath. He smiled. "This is beautiful. Is it yours?" Emma, startled by his sudden appearance, nodded cautiously. "Yes. Thank you." Daniel handed it back carefully, as if it were something fragile. "I'm Daniel," he said, extending his hand. "Emma," she replied. That was how it began. They started meeting in the park, by coincidence at first, then by choice. Daniel, a history professor at NYU, brought books with him. Emma, a freelance illustrator, brought her sketch pad. They talked about art and literature, about forgotten empires and how leaves always seemed to fall in slow motion when you watched closely. Their conversations meandered like the paths in the park, and time began to slip by unnoticed. By mid-November, Daniel brought coffee. By December, he brought her gloves, deep green, soft wool. "For your sketching hands," he said. She laughed and slipped them on. "Now I won't be able to blame the cold for bad drawings." Winter came, and with it came long walks under Christmas lights, shared stories by candlelight, and spontaneous snowball fights that ended in warm kisses. But life, as it always does, introduced a pause. In March, Emma received an offer from a Paris publishing house to illustrate a major children's book series. It was everything she had dreamed of. "I have to go," she told Daniel one evening, her voice soft and trembling. "This might be the only chance I'll ever get." Daniel didn't try to stop her. He understood. That night, he held her for hours as the rain painted streaks on the windows, and when morning came, he watched her walk away at JFK, one last sketch folded into her passport, a drawing of the tree where they first met, with the words, "Come back when autumn comes again." Paris was everything she had hoped, and yet, it wasn't quite whole. She missed his voice, the way he narrated stories from the past like they were happening now. She missed the way he looked at her sketches like they were rare treasures. She missed the park, the coffee, the green gloves. But she stayed. She fulfilled her contract, completed 5 books, and signed 100 copies. She told herself that her art came first. Until one day in late September, while walking by the Seine, she saw a maple tree. It wasn't the same, but it reminded her. And in that moment, she knew. Emma landed back in New York on October 9th, 360 days after she had left. She went straight to the park. The tree was still there, taller, perhaps. The leaves were beginning to turn gold again. She waited, uncertain, heart pounding. Then she saw him. Daniel was sitting on the bench beneath the tree, reading. There was a second coffee cup beside him, untouched. She didn't say anything at first. She just sat down beside him. He looked up slowly. Their eyes met. No words were needed. "You came back," he said, softly. "When autumn came again," she whispered. From that day forward, they didn't count the seasons by months anymore, but by how many they spent together. They got married in the spring, beneath that same tree in Central Park. And every autumn, without fail, they returned to sit beneath the maple leaves and remember the day their story began, with a sketch, a smile, and a gust of wind. A song beneath the stars. In a small coastal town called Windmere, where the sea sang lullabies to the moon and the breeze carried secrets of old love stories, lived a quiet musician named Ethan. He played the violin every evening on the wooden deck that overlooked the waves, his melodies soft as whispers and deep as longing. Ethan had lived in Windmere all his life, content with solitude, his music, and the rhythm of the sea. That was until Clara arrived. Clara was a travel writer from the city, escaping a life of deadlines and expectations. She had come to Windmere for peace, but found something unexpected. The first time she heard Ethan play, she was walking barefoot along the beach, her journal in hand. The sound drew her like a dream, and she stood beneath the deck, eyes closed, listening as if the notes were written just for her. The next day, she returned. And the next. Until Ethan finally noticed the woman who always stood beneath the stars, listening. "Do you always listen from down there?" he asked one evening, leaning over the railing. She smiled, brushing windblown hair from her face. "Only when the music makes me feel like I've remembered something I never lived." He laughed softly. "That's exactly why I play." From that night on, their conversations began. At first, short exchanges, music and words intertwining like waves on the shore. Then, longer talks about books, dreams, loneliness, and healing. They shared stories under lantern light, roasted marshmallows, and danced barefoot in the moonlight, the violin lying forgotten between them. Ethan learned that Clara had been engaged once, to a man who loved ambition more than love. She learned that Ethan once dreamed of orchestras and grand halls, but gave it all up after his mother passed away, finding more comfort in the ocean's applause than any crowd. Their hearts, both carrying old wounds, found solace in one another. Slowly, like petals unfurling, love bloomed, not loud or dramatic, but steady and sure. One night, as the Perseid meteor shower painted silver trails across the sky, Ethan brought Clara to the lighthouse cliff. He held his violin and said, "This time, I want you to hear the song from up close." He played a melody he'd written just for her, gentle, yearning, filled with every unspoken word he couldn't say aloud. When the final note faded into the sea's hush, he looked at her, his voice shaking. "I think I've been writing this song since before I met you." Tears shimmered in Clara's eyes. She touched his hand. "And I think I've been waiting to hear it my whole life." They kissed under the stars, as if the universe paused to hold its breath. Clara never left Windmere. She stayed, not just for the music, but for the quiet man who made her heart sing. Years passed. The deck by the sea still held the sound of Ethan's violin. But now, a new sound accompanied it, Clara's laughter, soft as sea breeze. Their love, like their music, remained eternal, gentle, and